Okay, so first I'd like to introduce Mary Frances. Mary Frances Smith has been working with and for children over the past 25 years in school-aged and mixed-age early learning programs. She holds a bachelor's degree in special education and is soon to graduate with a master's of arts in community engagement. Her research focused on workforce stability in ELCC using a qualitative, community-engaged approach. Her pan-Canadian team of researchers published the Alberta Compensation Framework and her thesis, Nurturing the Nurturers, Understanding Support Systems for Early Childhood Educators in Alberta, asked ECEs what they feel they need to feel supported. She hopes the thesis reveals the complex nature of ECEs' experiences by examining their motivations to enter and remain in the sector, giving voice and agency to their hopes and struggles, and providing policymakers with frontline solutions, as well as building a system of early learning and care. Our second presenter tonight, Christopher Smith, is the Associate Executive Director for the Muttart Foundation, a private charitable foundation based in Edmonton. He has lead responsibility for the foundation's work in the area of early learning and childcare. Christopher serves on the steering committee for the Community University Partnership for the Study of Children, Youth, and Families at the University of Alberta, and is a member of the Edmonton Council for Early Learning and Care. He was appointed to the National Advisory Council on Early Learning and Childcare in fall 2022. Christopher formerly served as a member of the National Expert Panel on Early Learning and Childcare Data and Research from 2019 to 2021, and is the former chair of the Success by Six Council of Partners for the Alberta Capital Region. So with those introductions, I'm going to turn it over to our guests, and you can go ahead and share your screen, Mary Frances, and start when you're ready to go.
Thank you, Allison. I'm happy to be here. Bear with me as I pull up my screen. Good evening. Thank you for joining us today as we embark on this very important topic of early learning and childcare workforce. My name is Mary Frances. The focus of my master's thesis in community engagement was Nurturing the Nurturers, Understanding the Support Systems for Early Childhood Educators in Alberta. This is me and my mom. Insert "ah" here. My mom was 37 when she had me. I, a middle-aged white settler woman and a first-generation Canadian. I'm the youngest of 6, the only girl of 3 older brothers, and I'm sure some people can relate. I'm the first in my family to attend post-secondary and not enter my family's blue-collar business. One of the reasons I'm attracted to early learning and childcare is that I recognize the importance of early experiences and how they laid the groundwork for life's trajectory. This led to a lifelong career working with and for children in various roles over the past few years, from direct care in school age to Head Start to an early learning teacher, writing accreditation standards, and now research. March 2020 saw 3 life-changing events for me. COVID was shutting down the world. My office closed due to red tape reduction, and 15 years of elder care ended. That summer allowed me to explore who I am and what I value. I was offered an opportunity to turn away from early learning and childcare, but I found myself drawn back in. That September, I took the flight curriculum course at MacEwan University to prepare to become a pedagogical partner. That gave me a front row seat to the potential of flight and to the roadblocks experienced by educators. One reflective assignment made me pause. The educators in my cohort spoke about making time, stealing time, snatching time, as though they could magically just create time, but they rarely mentioned supported time. I wondered about the myriad of barriers ECEs experience in their practice, and at the same time, an invitation to enroll in the Masters of Arts in Community Engagement program was posted. I've always been interested in community engaged approaches, having taken professional learning sessions previously. The timing was perfect. My interests in early learning and childcare and community-engaged approaches could marry. We know that the early years are a critical period in a child's development, and the people around them matter. Well-qualified and committed early child educators can have a significant influence on a child's life. The Government of Canada recognized the importance of accessible, affordable, and inclusive early learning and childcare, and created multilateral agreements with each province and territory, with the goal of creating a national early learning and childcare system. Alberta's bilateral agreement is invested $3.8 billion into our sector. Bill C-35 was 50 years in the making and was recently enacted, committing the federal government to build and fund a national system of early learning and childcare. Upon entering graduate school, I moved into an already established partnership with the Association of Early Child Educators of Alberta that was already established with the Community University Partnership. ECE amplifies the voice of early child educators by advocating for higher educational standards, better wages, and working conditions within a supportive system of support. Its mission is to transform Alberta's early learning and childcare workforce into a recognized profession. In conversations with ECE, it became very apparent that the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Initiative had opened up a policy window. The goals of CWELC, the Canada-wide agreement, to create 45,000 new childcare spaces and hire 7,000 to 20,000 new educators. However, concerns regarding workforce retention persist, with some predictions that it could take 10 years to meet those targets. The literature shows ECEs leave due to burnout, stress, and low pay. Despite high motivations to work with children, they seek less stressful working environments and better paying jobs elsewhere. The turnover of ECEs creates a cycle where new ECEs just replace those who leave. All good intentions of the agreement cannot be met when early child educators leave, and we cannot system build when we're just replacing educators. We also can't move the needle on deepening pedagogical practice when programs are stuck in a cycle of training and hiring. Consequently, the sector faces challenges in meeting these requirements. The policy window is an opportunity to ensure that ECE's voices are included as decisions are being made on their behalf. To meet these goals, we need to really understand the factors of workforce retention and stability. ECE and I decided that a community-engaged approach with a qualitative descriptive methodology would be used. The community-engaged approach co-constructs the research design and emphasizes shared decision-making with the outcome of social action. Qualitative descriptive methods embrace the participants' voices, allowing themes to develop from their words. 3 overarching questions guided my research. What factors contribute to ECEs feeling supported? How can those factors contribute to workforce stability? And what solutions come from them? I interviewed 11 Alberta certified ECEs, 10 were level 3, and were from all regions and all program types. 3 identified as new Canadians and 1 identified as Indigenous. Interviews were semi-structured using an interview guide, which allowed me to follow curiosities, but while maintaining academic rigor. I used an adapted strategic questioning approach. This allows me to move through a person through questions, a series of questions that scaffold their thinking and reflections. These questions invite options, possibilities, and create motion while participants explore how they can move an issue forward so they don't feel powerless or othered. You can also ask uncomfortable, taboo, or unaskable questions in a safe environment. It avoids yes, no, and why questions. Strategic questions can bridge multiple points of view, move the conversation away from binary answers, and always respects the person and assumes that they have the answers. The interview questions had 5 focus areas. The first was basically on their individual experiences. I wanted them to reflect back on what motivated them to enter the sector, what expectations they had, and how does their current situation compare? The next set of questions looked at interactions and relationships. What kind of relationships did they have with their coworkers? Who do they turn to share a happy moment? Who do they turn to when they face a challenging experience? How is team collaboration encouraged? How do they manage stress? And how does being an early learning childcare educator impact their family and personal life? The next round of questions was looking at support factors within the workplace. What decisions that were made that supported them in their role and challenged their role? How are they invited into decision-making? What opportunities did they have for professional development? I did show them the wage grid and the non-salaried compensation. And I also asked, what would career progression look like? The fourth set of questions was looking at more of the societal perceptions. So I asked them about decisions being made societally about them, and why would they may most likely leave their current position or the sector. The last questions, I really wanted to find out what the solutions were. And I asked them, what would you say to someone just entering the sector? What do you want families to know about what you do? What would you say to a policymaker who was sitting in front of you? How can you advocate? And how could we get everybody to work together? Through thematic analysis, we found 5 themes and several sub-themes. In the following slides, I will describe them using participant quotes. All the ECEs interviewed showed great pride in their practice. They were personally passionate about their work with children and families and really could see how they made differences. They wanted to be recognized as professionals rather than being perceived as babysitters or just attending to custodial care. They emphasized the importance of being valued and respected by society and the hopes that this would also lead to better compensation and working conditions. They wanted the community to understand their essential role in shaping future generations. While they all had a patchwork of professional identity, they also found connection through their professional learning. I didn't ask specifically about the types of PD, just PD in general, but many participants called themselves brain builders, a term used by the Brain Story Theory to Practice Learning series, a session purposely created for Alberta's ECEs in partnership with the Muttart Foundation. One ECE summed up this theme very well. When an educator really gets that they serve a child for what they need in that moment, it's not a programmed response. I can really feel that they're creating connection with the children. You know, we're building brains. Despite their personal passion and pride in their work, participants described work-life balance difficulties. This theme showed the challenges ECEs had in not just balancing their personal lives, but their professional lives. They mentioned donating their time, working evenings and weekends without compensation, putting strain not just on their personal well-being, but their professional time when it was not supported. When professional time was not supported, they used their personal time. They also mentioned the financial burden that they sometimes experienced, sometimes needing to buy basic supplies for the program. With their low compensation already, this put a strain on their family's budget, with one ECE saying that their spouse could not understand why they had to buy paint. Many ECEs mentioned the need for supported stress management policies that demonstrated understanding of well-being, such as accumulated vacation leave. One ECE mentioned that some of her coworkers wouldn't even take vacation if it wasn't accumulated, since they wouldn't be compensated. They mentioned personal self-care strategies such as exercise, walking, crafts, or meditation. One educator described this self-care strategy of being on all day. At the end of the day, I come home and I don't want to talk to anybody. I need to have that time to decompress, analyze the day, figure out what I did right, what I did wrong, so I can do better the next day. Alongside personal passion, pride, and professional identity, and work-life balance, ECEs emphasize that positive professional relationships can really affect workforce stability. Collaboration and teamwork helped create a sense of belonging in an environment that encouraged creativity, staff appreciation, effective problem solving. By sharing ideas and experiences and best practices, they felt connected to each other. Protected professional time supported their sense of well-being and belonging. They also suggested that developing a partnership with families based on mutual respect yielded positive results, resulting in reinforcing their attachment to children and their families. Connections to professional associations and communities of practice that supported their ongoing professional learning and practice made them feel valued, and therefore kept them attached to the sector. One commented on the loss of a local daycare association when funding ended and the impact on their sector. One very surprising sub-theme for me was the development of a professional identity through curriculum connections. Many ECs mentioned that through consistent and connected professional learning, they found common language, common values, and a connection to themselves. Flight was mentioned as one possible avenue for connection through curriculum. These interconnected positive professional relationships with others and themselves reinforce their internal motivations to work with children. One ECE comment, "It's really nice to work with people who understand what you're saying. You don't have to explain it. We all share the same background. We all come from the same theories and practices. We really could work together to support each other because we got it. We could bounce ideas off each other." The fourth theme was supportive organizational structures around ECEs. Participants described a broad spectrum of experiences with leadership, from being valued and trusted and cared for to having an absent owner who didn't provide guidance or even onboarding. One ECE mentioned that the extent of onboarding for her was being shown her room and told not to get in trouble with licensing. Participants described the benefits of supportive operational practices, which included clear policies, communication channels, protected professional time, reasonable workloads, a safe environment, and adequate resources. All these practices enable them to perform their roles effectively. When educators had an opportunity to express their voice and agency over daily decisions, they felt trusted and supported by their organization, and this positively impacted their job satisfaction, well-being, and overall commitment to the sector. Participants also mentioned the importance of seeing where their careers could go next, not just in their workplace, but in the sector. However, they were often either shown few opportunities or were not informed about opportunities. Overall, ECEs felt that fair compensation through a wage grid would make them feel valued and appreciated, prevent them from working multiple jobs to pay their bills or relying on spousal support. They also said a wage grid could also make it harder to devalue their work. Collectively, these factors influences ECEs to feel supported and valued. And one ECE summed up this theme well. Educators go where there are leaders. They want that environment. They want to be connected to the teams. They want to be happy when they go to work. Lastly, educators indicated that policies matter. The participants mentioned concerns about licensing regulations and enforcement, especially regarding high ratios. They noted that when regulations are not consistently enforced, mistrust in the sector can result. One ECE described an ethical dilemma of wanting to report a program they knew was not working within licensing ratios. The ECEs interviewed also mentioned the current certification process and the need for consistent competencies. They noted that when ECEs lack practical experience before entering the workforce, they may require extra resources to train and mentor them, putting extra strain and stress on the educators to do components that are typically included in robust pre-service training. The ECEs very much appreciated the professional development funding offered through CWELP and were taking advantage of the opportunities available. One was gaining her level 2, another was taking the Red Deer Polytechnic Leadership course. Many had taken the sponsored professional learning series, such as all the Flight Sort series and the Theory to Practice. Lastly, all ECEs valued the opportunity to be invited into the discussion about factors that affected them. They all wanted policymakers to spend a week in their program, not just stop by for a photo op. They said, "This interview made me want to change the world. This interview has shown me where my passions lie in early childhood. It starts with the kids. There's a lot done for families, don't get me wrong, that's amazing, but there's a flip side to it. Workers need a voice." This research suggests that ECEs are more likely to stay in the sector when they are supported and valued for their practice and are professionally engaged. All community stakeholders share this responsibility. ECEs are not voiceless. They know what they need. They can also support these efforts by making their practice visible. Professional associations such as ECE, AFCA, and SACTA can use these findings to support their mission and vision. Service providers can ensure that ECEs have supportive working conditions with reasonable workloads, mentorship, and protected time to connect with colleagues. The broader community can ensure that ECEs are valued for their practice. And lastly, we can ensure that ECEs' working conditions are children's learning conditions. We can support ECEs so they can thrive as children thrive. Policymakers can use these findings for frontline solutions for workforce stability as we system build. Policy implications that arose from this data include a need for public awareness campaign of the value and impact of well-qualified early learning and childcare workforce on the community, the implementation of a wage grid so ECEs can see that an investment in their career is worth it, creating a checklist of supportive working conditions so ECEs know what they should expect when they enter the workforce, conducting a review of the impact of the orientation course on the sector, and publication of the competency-based assessment conducted last year would be beneficial. Creating mentorship structures so that ECEs have ongoing support. Coordinate funding approaches so that the system of funding is reliable, coherent, and consistent. Policymakers can also engage with ECEs for perspectives and solutions. They know what they need. A central concept cutting across all themes was nurturing. ECEs understood this well and how it applies to children and families. We know that a person needs nurturing to flourish. Nurturing involves providing care, support, encouragement to help them thrive. We can apply these concepts easily to children. An ECE's personal passion for working with and for children can be seen as the seed we need to nourish. By adding support around ECEs through fair compensation, supportive work environments, and solid policy decisions, the personal passion that initially attached ECEs to the sector can be nurtured for long-term workforce retention and stability. We have a roadmap for workforce retention and stability. ECEs know what they need. We just need to listen. Together, we need to nurture the nurturers. Thank you all for joining me today.
Thank you, Mary Frances. That was awesome. I think we will go ahead with Chris's presentation and then we will save the questions and you can either put them in the chat or we can ask them afterwards. So Christopher, you can go ahead and share your screen and start your slide.
Great. Thanks everybody. So I've started sharing. So can everyone see the screen okay? Thanks. So thank you everyone. Thanks for joining this evening. As the names were clicking in, I saw some very familiar names. I was going to say I saw some familiar faces, but it's more familiar black screens. So I welcome everyone. And thanks for joining tonight. And thank you particularly to those of you who are working directly in early learning and childcare, and appreciate your time and your work. I know you've probably had a very busy day working in ratio or working with children. So thank you for taking time to be here this evening. So what I'm going to do quickly this evening is just to present to you some findings from the research that the Muttart Foundation, working in partnership with ECE and the Alberta Leaders Caucus, did in the fall. And I'm going to talk specifically about what early childhood educators said about their working conditions. So I think it aligns fairly well with remarks that Mary Frances made. And as the names were clicking in, I noticed that the two researchers who worked with us on the project have joined the webinar this evening. So we were really fortunate as we went out and did the research to have Nikki DeBlanco and Jane Beach facilitate the sessions for us. And so I'm sure most of you know Nikki, and I'm sure most of you have had a chance to read Jane's work. So, oops, so I'm trying to find out how to advance the screen. So, okay. So I think it's fairly clear by now that Alberta, like other provinces, we're involved in trying to build a system of early learning and childcare, and it really goes back to federal budget 2021 when Deputy Prime Minister Freeland announced the federal commitment to work with the provinces to build pan-Canadian early learning and childcare system. And the goal of that system was really to transform early learning and childcare sectors, market-based sectors, into publicly funded systems that improved services for children and families. And for those of you on the call, I'll recognize some of the names. People have been working for this for a long while, trying to move from really underfunded, poorly resourced sectors to hopefully more publicly funded and managed systems. So this was a very important development. But those of us who've been working in it as well also know this is not something that takes place overnight. This is going to require a significant amount of work and energy, and it's going to take time and effort. So we're really still at the first phase of system building. And I would like to note very importantly, just as we're doing the pan-Canadian system building work, there is also an Indigenous early learning and childcare framework, which is really seeking leadership of Indigenous governments to develop services that are self-determined and reflect the distinctions-based approach. So in terms of the Alberta agreement, Alberta.
Chris, sorry to interrupt. I'm still seeing your first slide.
Okay.
And I just want to know if everyone else is, or if maybe it's just stuck on my computer.
Okay. Is everyone still seeing the first slide? Or okay, let me see. Okay. So, oh,
There we go.
there we go. Okay, sorry about that.
Perfect.
Yeah, I should let you know my hometown is in Nottingham, England, which is where the Luddites are from. So I've inherited that tradition of being really bad with technology. So my apologies. So Alberta signed a system building agreement in the fall of 2021. We were the 8th province to sign, and like every province, when we signed, we did a kind of little bit of a lap of honor and said that this was the most important agreement, and it aligned up with the interests of childcare providers across the province. And the Canada-wide system building agreements are all structured remarkably similarly. They have a focus on affordability, accessibility, inclusion, and quality. And essentially what they're trying to do is, as I say, take systems or take sectors of early learning and childcare and transform them into publicly funded and managed systems. And the federal investment over the 5 years for Alberta, it's a very significant level of investment. It's $3.8 billion over 5 fiscal years. And just to be clear, that federal money was never meant to be the only money that's used to support system building. When the federal government announced the commitment to pan-Canadian system building in 2021, it didn't say, and this will only be on the federal dime. It talked about collaborative partnerships. So whilst that federal investment of $3.8 billion is significant, it's also intended to support additional provincial investments. And so the Alberta's agreement, like every other agreement, had a 2-year action plan that has now ended. And now we're in the process of we're developing a 3-year action plan, which will take us to the end of the 5-year agreement. And if we think about system building, one of the advantages to coming to system building later in the day is that we've got some examples to learn from. We can look at what's happened in other jurisdictions, and we can reflect on a very significant body of research and evidence around what allows a high quality early learning childcare system to function and to serve families well. And as we build this system in Alberta, we need to attend to research, but we also need to attend to the voices of the stakeholders. And that includes the voices of early child educators. And I'm afraid, not only in Alberta, but perhaps across the country, we've probably been a little bit reluctant or negligent in talking to early child educators to ask them about their contributions, their anticipations, their expectations on system building. And so that is what the work that I'm going to talk to you tonight tried to do. So in summer 2023, the First Ministers met in Iqaluit in July, and what they determined was that we've started on affordability and accessibility, and we've made progress, but now we need to recognize that we have to invest in the workforce. If we're going to build high-quality early learning and childcare systems across the country, then we're not going to do it without making significant investments in the early learning and childcare workforce. So in July 2023, what the First Minister said is that we're going to commit to develop a multilateral workforce strategy. And as part of that strategy, what we're going to have to do is to address the early child educators' compensation and their working conditions. Because if we don't improve those, then we really won't move forward in terms of system building. We are not going to build a high-quality early learning and childcare system without having a well-compensated, supported, and professional early learning and childcare workforce. So that's a given. So the question is, what is it that we need to do? So in the fall of 2023, the Muttart Foundation, working with ECE and the Alberta Leaders Caucus, we said, what we're going to do is we're going to go out and we're going to support focus group discussions with early child educators to ask them for their thoughts, their advice, their comments on their experiences in respect to their working conditions, in respect to their access to benefits, and in respect to their compensation. And so we held 11 different focus groups, 3 in person and 8 virtual. We had focus group populations of 122 different participants, mainly frontline ECEs. We also included family childcare providers, and we also included 2 groups with students, about 15 students, the majority of whom were actually already working in the field to some degree or other. So When we started out the research, we started with two premises, and this is, I think Mary Frances talked to this very well. The two premises is that we are not going to recruit and retain early childhood educators, qualified professional early childhood educators, unless we make improvements in their compensation and their work is recognized and valued. People often say in early learning childcare, we have a recruitment problem. No, we have a retention problem. We're actually bringing lots of new staff in, but they're not staying. The second premise was, and Mary Frances spoke well to this, early childhood educators' working conditions are children's learning conditions. Early childhood educators' well-being has a fundamental impact on the quality of care that children receive. So for my presentation today, I'm going to focus just on the working conditions. We've got a wealth of material and access to benefits, and we've got a wealth of material on compensation, but I'm going to focus tonight on working conditions. And remember, we all know this, the educator's working conditions are the child's learning conditions. So if we're thinking, where does quality start? It starts in high quality working environments and conditions for early childhood educators. So what do they tell us about their working conditions? What are they currently saying? Well, the first thing is that educators' working conditions, we all know this, they're actually complex wholes. They're shaped both by the broad areas of policy, including funding, as well as regulation, but they're also shaped by the specific features and characteristics of the programs in which they work. And when educators talk to us about their working conditions, two real strong things emerged. And I think this is something we all need to attend to. The first thing that emerged was that there were very significant variations in the working conditions that educators described. They ranged from the very good to be honest, they're very poor. So there was a massive variation across programs and services. And what I would say to you is that when we look at other publicly funded services, we don't see that nature of range and variation in working conditions. So some educators talked about having very high quality working environments, and many talked about having very low quality working environments. So this is very significant variation. The second thing they talked about is that their working conditions, they're becoming more challenging and they're becoming more difficult. And that's not something that's linked to something that's taken place over the last 2 or 3 years. That's a longer term trend. And in many cases, educators reflected back to the pandemic and its impact on early learning and childcare sectors, not only in Alberta, but also across the country. So what were the key areas of challenge that they identified? And what I would suggest to you, I'm probably not going to be surprised by these, but I think it's important that these are the voices of educators. The first thing they described is that there's very limited time and resources to orientate and support new educators as they enter the field. Now, the research is quite clear. When new educators enter the field, if we want to make sure they stay, then we need to support them and resource them during their first phase of work. They need to be supported in their initial learning. And what staff shared with us now is at the moment, we have more staff starting with limited experience, less education, and we're not able to allocate time and energy to support them. So are those staff going to stay in the field? I'm not sure. What they also said was, as part of that orientation, part of that initial support, wouldn't it be marvelous if educators, when they started in the field, could actually participate in an observer role, if they weren't required to be in ratio the first day they turned up on shift, and if they had opportunities to be coached and supported by other staff. So that's the first challenge, limited time and resources to orient new staff. And we have very significant levels of turnover, so we're orientating and supporting lots of new staff. The second area of challenge they identified, again, I don't think this is any surprise, they talked about the challenges that they're facing with the current staff to child ratios and the current group sizes. And what they commented on was that in many cases now, for them to deliver high quality early learning childcare, what they need are enhanced ratios. They need more staff than are required in regulation to support high quality care for children and families. Particularly, they said, with infants. In those infants, that 12 to 19 months, that 1-to-4 ratio, that's a real struggle for educators at the moment. The second thing they commented on was that the group sizes seem unusually large. And for many educators working with up to 16 young children in a room, it was such a demanding and chaotic environment that it was making it difficult to provide quality childcare. So again, Key child to staff ratios need to be revised, and large group sizes need to be reconsidered. The third area that they identified is what they were noted is that there's been an increase in the number of children with additional needs. There's been more children with what we might think of as social emotional needs, additional needs, some of it linked to the pandemic, but also they're seeing more children with developmental needs, developmental delays, whether it's in speech and language, autism, and other related delays. And what they commented on was that it's becoming increasingly difficult for educators to access the supports and services that those children need. They talked about very long delays in getting a child diagnosed. They talked about even longer delays with the diagnosis in receiving funding and supports. And they shared examples of children just literally aging out of care. Children left the childcare before the supports and resources arrived. So a very significant challenge. Fourth challenge, they talked about it. There is a shortage of qualified staff, and we have high rates of staff turnover. Across the focus groups, one of the common themes was that it's really hard to find level 3 certified staff who are experienced to work in regulated childcare. If you lose a level 3 staff person, it's really hard to replace them. Essentially, you're going to replace them with a new level 1 who has very limited education and often has no experience working in the field. So this is taking a huge toll on the workforce. Experienced educators are facing burnout, increasing levels of stress in their workforces, and newer and inexperienced staff are leaving after relatively short periods of employment. So we have a workforce that's undergoing significant turnover and significant change, and that is impacting on the working conditions of early childhood educators. What they finally said was that they're looking at increased workloads, longer work days, and they're losing that very precious non-contact time. The contact time that they need for program planning and preparation is disappearing, partly because educators now are having to take on more roles in supporting and training new educators as they come on. They're the coaches and mentors to the new staff, and they're also dealing with staff shortages. So even staff who said that they had dedicated planning time in their schedules, we're seeing that dedicated planning time lost. So there's a very limited non-contact time, and that is creating additional stress. They also talked about having to take on additional responsibilities in things like cleaning and sanitizing. And so their work days are getting longer, and their critical program planning time is being reduced. What did they say is working? What does it say that can help support them in part of their practice? And this was very important. Professional learning, including mentoring and coaching, ECEs found that incredibly important and incredibly valuable. And what they asked for is, can we have dedicated PD days? Can we have PD days where the whole center shuts down and educators work and learn together? It's okay going off on individual courses, but can we work together as a team and build our team capacity? They also talked about some educators now are finding it more difficult to access PD, even though it's important. If your day is longer, if you're coming home more stressed, it's really hard to do professional learning in the evening when you've also got family responsibilities outside of work. And critically, what they said can make a real difference in their working conditions is supportive management and workplace cultures. So if the leadership in a center is committed to creating a positive environment for the workforce, that can go a very long way in advancing early learning and childcare educators' working conditions. They talked about having autonomy in their workplaces. They talked about having opportunities for growth and development. Those kind of opportunities can help bolster ECEs in their work. So I think there's 5 areas of particular need, and these all speak to some policy considerations. Finally, when we talk to family childcare providers about their working conditions, some very similar stresses, and what they homed in on was they're working longer hours. They described working 10 to 12-hour days with literally no backup care. And that is creating an incredible burden on early childhood educators in family childcare environments. What they described as incredibly important for them was the resources and supports that they were able to receive from their family day home agencies. Family day home agencies, consultants, can be incredible supports for the providers, but what the family day home agency can also do is connect family childcare providers with other family childcare providers, breaking down the isolation that they feel. So I think it's fair to say, in terms of the working conditions, I would argue that our early learning and childcare workforces are under the highest levels of stress that certainly I've seen. And so that's going to require significant changes to address them. So here's what early childhood educators said. And I think some of this aligns with Mary Frances's work. And I think it's really important that we hear what early childhood educators are saying in their own voice. Their voices matter, and we need to listen to their voices. First voice, this is about orientation. I was definitely just thrown right in. I was given a handbook. I was in their level with a level 2 and had to figure it out on myself. That is not a good orientation process. No matter how skilled you are, you're not going to succeed. Second comment, I loved working with children. The center that I was in, there was very nice. They explained things. They supported me. Compare the two differences between that experience. That second experience should be the experience that every educator has. Third comment, and this is one that I think we probably all know. Sometimes I feel I'm just trying to get through the day, making sure that everyone is safe. By the time I go home, I wonder if I did anything that would benefit the children. That is a professional educator saying to me, saying to us, I'm not able to support the quality that I know children need, and I want to provide as a professional. And then finally, the comment on ratios. Enhanced ratios are so important, but look at the final part of the quote. It works great if you can get the educators. So we know when ratios, enhanced ratios work, but we can't find the staff to provide them. Final set of comments, personal voices of ECEs. If you are short-staffed, it does feel isolating. If you have a single educator in a room with a group of children, you're isolated your entire day, you feel more burned out and alone. We're in ratio, but we're only surviving, not thriving. We have children that have additional needs, and the care and support is just not available. Management is really important. Having someone that you know can have a voice your concerns to, that you can be heard, that can advocate for you, is important. And then finally, a comment from a family childcare educator. My biggest supporter has been the agency. They're amazing. So the next steps for this research are to take those voices and craft the policy, recommendations, and solutions that will support early childhood educators' working conditions. The good news is we're coming to system building late. We actually know the things that will improve the working conditions for early childhood educators. We know it. Educators are willing to share with us what that is. So the question now is, do we have the political will to make those changes? As part of writing up the report, what the Muttart Foundation, the Leaders Caucus, and ECE will do, we will go back out and we will share the findings with educators, and we will share the observations and recommendations around policy level work. But I just want to say to all of us on this call, this work, while it was important, this is not the final word. As we build a publicly funded early learning and childcare system, it's going to be critical that the voices of early childhood educators are to the fore. We would not set out to build a public health system without talking to nurses. We would not set out to build a public education system without talking to teachers. So when we're building a public early learning and childcare system, we better think out how are we going to talk to early childhood educators. So I'm just going to stop there, stop sharing my screen. I'm sure Mary Frances and myself are happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christopher and Mary Frances. So if you have a question for either, feel free to pop it in the chat, or you can raise your hand and then I will call your name and you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Whatever works best for you is fine with us. I'm just going to start off with a question I had, which is, Mary Frances, if you want to go first, I was just wondering if you could recommend a few things to policymakers, what would you say?
Yeah, I think some easy things to implement would be publishing the competency-based assessment so that we can all see some of the things that ECEs should be expected. I think looking at the working conditions, as Christopher was pointing out, I think some of those would be some easy wins, and looking at the wage grid that was presented to ministry. Where it is right now with the change in ministry, we're not quite sure, but I think looking at those possibilities might be a good start.
Yeah, just sort of echoing that. I think when we think about conceptually, how do we support the workforce? I think initially the first thing we have to address compensation. We have to improve compensation and make it more fair and equitable. And when we do that, that will buy us a little bit of time. But if we don't immediately then start working on improving the working conditions, the educators will still leave. I think the first thing that I would say we need to do is we need to look at that non-contact time. How do we designate, preserve, and support paid non-contact time as an integral part of an EC data? That's absolutely critical. You cannot do program planning. You cannot do reflection. You cannot do team building. You cannot do development unless you have paid non-contact time. And so I think those are the first two things: address compensation and then work to establish and, if you like, institutionalize paid non-contact time as an integral part of an ECE's day. Not just an add-on, not just a nice to have, but an essential part of their day.